Imagine this scenario. You've been feeling exhausted for months, maybe years. Deep, bone-weary fatigue. You finally go to the doctor, they run some blood work, and they come back with what sounds like good news. It's your thyroid. It's sluggish. You get a prescription for thyroid medication, and you think, finally, this is the fix. I'm gonna get my energy back. But then you take the pill, and instead of feeling better, you feel like you're vibrating. Your heart starts racing, you feel anxious, shaky, maybe even nauseous. And beneath that wired feeling, the exhaustion is actually worse. It's a paradox that drives patients crazy and often leaves doctors scratching their heads. Why would the very medicine designed to give you energy make you feel like you're crashing?
It is a terrifying experience, and unfortunately, it's not uncommon. What you are describing is the classic collision between two major hormone systems that are supposed to be dance partners, but have suddenly stepped on each other's toes.
Right. We are looking at the article Cortisol and Thyroid Hormones, a Two-Way Street from My Adrenal Life. But we're going to go much deeper than just the text. We're talking about the HPA axis, the HPT axis, and why treating one without checking the other is, and I don't use this word lightly, dangerous.
Dangerous is the correct word. In endocrinology, we often study glands in isolation. You have a thyroid specialist, or you check TSH levels in a vacuum, but the body doesn't work like that. The article makes a crucial point right at the start. Cortisol and thyroid hormones are the co-regulators of your metabolism. If you try to fix one while the other is broken, you aren't just failing to fix the problem, you are actively stressing a system that is already near collapse.
So let's break this down. The article mentions these two axes, the HPA and the HPT. I feel like we hear these acronyms a lot in the wellness space, but what are they actually doing in relation to each other?
Think of them as two parallel command chains that both start in the same headquarters, the brain. HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal. That's your stress response, your blood pressure, your cortisol. HPT is hypothalamic pituitary thyroid. That's your metabolic rate, your heat, your speed. The best analogy I've found, and it helps explain that wired but tired crash you mentioned, is a high-performance car. The thyroid hormone is the gas pedal. It tells your cells to go faster, burn more oxygen, make more energy. But cortisol is the oil and the coolant. It maintains the structural integrity of the engine under pressure. It keeps blood sugar stable so the engine has fuel, and it maintains blood pressure so the fuel can get to the engine.
Okay, I love that. So if I have hypothyroidism, my car is idling too low. I'm moving at 5 miles an hour.
Exactly. So you take levothyroxine, that's like stomping on the gas pedal. But if you have adrenal insufficiency, if you don't have enough cortisol, you have no oil in the engine. You stomp on the gas, the RPMs fly up, the car shakes, the engine overheats, and eventually it seizes up. That is exactly why patients feel shaky and anxious. You have increased the metabolic demand on the body, but you haven't provided the metabolic support to handle it.
That explains the physical sensation of the crash. But there is a very specific mechanism mentioned in the research regarding the liver. The article touches on cortisol clearance. Can you unpack that? Because it sounds like the thyroid meds are actually eating up the cortisol.
That is precisely what is happening. It's a physiological trap. Thyroid hormones regulate the metabolism of everything, including other hormones. When you introduce thyroid medication, the liver speeds up. It starts metabolizing or clearing cortisol from the blood much faster. Now, in a healthy person, the brain senses this drop in cortisol and shouts at the adrenals, "Hey, make more." and the adrenals comply. But in someone with adrenal insufficiency, the adrenals are already tapped out. They cannot make more. So you speed up the clearance of the tiny amount of cortisol they did have, and suddenly their levels drop to near zero. This can trigger an adrenal crisis, which is a life-threatening emergency involving vascular collapse. The NIDDK guidelines are actually very strict about this. You must assess adrenal function before starting thyroid replacement for this exact reason.
It's wild that this isn't standard knowledge for every patient walking out with a thyroid script. I want to pivot to the conversion aspect because this was the part of the deep dive that really surprised me. The article mentions that cortisol affects how we convert T4 into T3. Can you walk us through that?
This is where we get into the biochemistry of why your labs might look normal, but you feel terrible. The thyroid gland mostly produces T4. T4 is a storage hormone. It doesn't do much on its own. It has to be converted into T3, which is the active hormone that actually enters your cells and gives you energy. This conversion happens thanks to enzymes called deiodinases. There are 3 types: D1, D2, and D3. Here is the kicker. Cortisol regulates these enzymes. If your cortisol is too low or chronically too high from stress, those enzymes stop working correctly.
So you have plenty of raw material, plenty of T4, but the factory workers who turn it into fuel are on strike.
Or worse, they start sabotaging the product. When the body is under stress or lacks cortisol stability, it often shifts from making T3 to making something called reverse T3. Think of reverse T3 as a mirror image of the active hormone. It fits into the receptor, but it doesn't turn it on. It's like breaking a key off in a lock. Not only does it not open the door, but now the real key, the active T3, can't get in either. It acts as a metabolic brake.
That's the metabolic brake mentioned in the text. So you're taking medication, your blood tests show you have enough T4, but your cells are essentially starving because it's all being turned into this dummy hormone, reverse T3.
Exactly, and standard TSH tests often miss this completely because they are looking at the pituitary signal, not the tissue's reality.
I want to zoom out a bit to the history of this. We're talking about these conditions like they are separate things, Addison's disease and hypothyroidism, but historically, haven't they been linked for a long time?
They have. In fact, we've known about this link for exactly a century. In 1926, a German pathologist named Martin Benno Schmidt described 2 patients who had both Addison's disease, which is primary adrenal failure, and chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis. This became known as Schmidt's syndrome.
Schmidt's syndrome. That sounds incredibly specific.
It is, but it's part of a broader category we now call autoimmune polyglandular syndrome type 2, or APS2. The poly is the key. It means many glands. If you have one autoimmune condition, like Hashimoto's, your risk of developing another, like Addison's, is significantly higher than the general population. The immune system doesn't just attack one target. It tends to attack the whole endocrine network. But medicine became so specialized in the 20th century that we started treating the organs as if they lived in different zip codes.
That fragmentation of care seems to be a huge barrier. The article also distinguishes between primary and central disorders. I found this part a bit dense. Why does it matter if the problem is in the thyroid gland versus the brain?
This is crucial for anyone with secondary adrenal insufficiency. So primary means the gland itself is broken, like in Hashimoto's or Addison's. The brain is shouting high TSH or high ACTH, but the gland isn't listening. That's easy to diagnose. But central means the problem is upstream in the pituitary gland. Maybe you had a head injury, a tumor, or radiation. If your pituitary is damaged, it might not send the signal to either the adrenals or the thyroid. This is called hypopituitarism.
And this is where the testing fails, right?
Right, because the standard screening test for thyroid is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. But TSH is the signal. If your pituitary is broken, your TSH will be low or normal even if your actual thyroid hormones are dangerously low.
A doctor might look at a normal TSH and tell a patient, your thyroid is fine, when in reality they have central hypothyroidism. And because the pituitary also controls the adrenals, these patients are at the highest risk of having both systems fail simultaneously.
That is terrifyingly easy to miss. It really highlights the importance of what the article calls nuanced perspectives. It's not just about looking at a reference range, it's about understanding the geometry of the system. I want to talk about the lived experience of this. We mentioned the anxiety and the palpitations. What else does this mismatch look like in day-to-day life?
It creates a very specific type of instability. Patients often describe it as being brittle. They might have a good hour where the thyroid meds kick in and they feel clarity, but then a minor stressor happens, a skipped meal, a tough phone call, and because they lack the cortisol buffer, they crash hard. Hypoglycemia is a big part of this too.
Hypoglycemia. How does that fit in?
Cortisol is a glucocorticoid, gluco referring to glucose. Its job is to keep blood sugar up between meals. Thyroid hormones increase your metabolic burn rate. They make you burn sugar faster. So high burn rate plus low sugar reserves equals a crash. Patients get shaky, sweaty, confused, and hangry. It's not just fatigue, it's metabolic failure.
And I assume this complicates the timing of medication, which the article touched on briefly. If these hormones have rhythms, are we messing them up by taking pills at the wrong time?
We absolutely can be. Cortisol has a diurnal rhythm. It peaks in the morning to wake you up and drops at night. Thyroid hormones are more stable, but still fluctuate. For someone with adrenal insufficiency who takes hydrocortisone, they are trying to mimic that natural curve manually. If you take your thyroid medication, which peaks in the blood a few hours later, at a time when your cortisol coverage is wearing off, you create a gap. You're hitting the gas pedal right when the oil is running low. Many patients find they have to synchronize their dosing very carefully to avoid that mid-afternoon slump.
It sounds like a constant balancing act. You're basically playing the role of your own pituitary gland, trying to manually coordinate signals that the body used to handle on autopilot.
That is a beautiful way to put it. You are manually operating the automatic transmission of your body, and that is why it is so exhausting. It's not just the disease, it's the cognitive load of managing the disease.
So, for the listeners who are hearing this and thinking, oh my God, this is me. I started thyroid meds and felt worse. What is the takeaway? The article mentions consulting an endocrinologist, obviously, but what specifically should they be asking?
The key is to advocate for the correct order of operations. If you suspect adrenal issues, if you have dizziness upon standing, salt cravings, or that wired, tired feeling, you need to ask to have your adrenals tested before or while addressing the thyroid. Specifically, asking for an 8 a.m. cortisol test or an ACTH stimulation test.
And if they are already on thyroid meds and feeling terrible?
They need to ask their doctor to review the interaction. Sometimes, and this is standard practice in adrenal crisis prevention, a doctor might temporarily lower the thyroid dose or introduce adrenal support to stabilize the patient before ramping the thyroid back up. You have to fix the foundation before you build the second floor.
It's a powerful reminder that the body doesn't specialize. It doesn't have a department of thyroid and a department of adrenals that don't talk to each other. It's all one conversation.
It is, and understanding that conversation, that two-way street, is the only way to really get well.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the mechanics of liver clearance to the history of Schmidt's syndrome. If you know someone who has been struggling with thyroid treatment that just doesn't seem to work, send this episode their way. It might be the missing piece of the puzzle they've been looking for.